Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chats with Yvonne Podcast. I'm your host, Yvonne Podcast. And I don't know if you know it, but you're walking into what I'm calling the revamped version of the Chats with Yvonne Podcast. Up until now, all of my episodes have been interviews, and I have loved that journey for me. Truly connecting with people through the art of public speaking. That's literally my dreams come true. And as is in my nature, I have the urge to dive deeper. That's not to say we're not going to continue to have interviews, we will. But this is what I'm thinking. I have thoughts about the public speaking industry and beyond that, quite frankly, just like linger with me for hours, days, even months. And honestly, I just need to let them out. So this is the avenue. We'll be focusing on the art of public speaking through the lens of very real conversations and thought pieces. I'll be doing my research, of course, and I'll put my journalist hat on to bring you the knowledge and history of public speaking, sprinkled in with my commentary to learn more about public speaking together. So with that being said, I want to reintroduce you to the Chats with Yvonne podcast. All right, let's do this. Welcome, everybody, to the Chats with Yvonne podcast, where we dive deep into the art of public speaking by talking about what most don't in ways that most won't. This space is for you, it's for me, and it's for anyone that has once been afraid to public speak because we were explicitly or implicitly made to feel that we didn't belong. Today, we're talking about safe spaces. Now, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I even got into this topic and why it's important for public speaking. In the season 2 opener of this podcast, I sat down with Brittany Johnson, a badass, culturally affirming educator, content creator, and so much more, who also happens to be hella funny and someone I could easily talk to for like 3 hours. And seriously, if we had the time to talk for 3 hours, we probably would have talked for the entire time. So if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and check it out. But towards the beginning of our conversation, I asked her what her earliest memory of public speaking was. And here's what she said.
So the first thing that is popping in my head is church. My father's a pastor, and my first memories of speaking in front of people comes from being in church. And I'm gonna say it was an Easter speech. Just being thrown in there, like, remember these 4 lines and get up there and say it, and just, it's a nice welcoming environment probably to have your first public speaking experience, because they're all your parents and church members and you're like, you got this, like, go ahead. So I think most of my first experiences speaking were either like speeches for church or having to, say a scripture or something during a like Sunday school lesson or something like that. But they definitely started in like a safe community.
Now, let me tell you that, first of all, conversations are so important to my personal growth. Just sitting down and talking to people is such an incredible learning experience for me. I learn about them, but also about myself and my own curiosities and like how I think about the world, So when I heard her say that her first public speaking engagement was in a safe space, and that not only was it a positive experience because of that, but that she thinks it played a role in how she shows up as a public speaker today, which is confident AF, immediately my mind went to the impacts of the very first time we're exposed to public speaking. So that's where this segment was born. Now, before we get into it, try to think about what that moment was for you, or even a series of moments. You may not know it now, you probably can't think of it off the top of your head, but the more you think about it, the more we talk about it, the more you'll uncover. And so I want you to think about, what is your earliest memory of public speaking? What did it feel like? What did it look like? Who were you surrounded by? Like, tell me about it. Talk to yourself about that a little bit. I'll talk about my safe spaces and first experiences with public speaking throughout the episode, and I hope you'll start to make connections with your own experience as we go. All right, let's talk safe spaces. I started my quest like most of us do nowadays, which is Google. I asked the search engine, what is a safe space? And here's what it said. A place or environment in which a person or category of people can feel confident that they will not be exposed to discrimination, criticism, harassment, or any other emotional or physical harm. And I, of course, I've heard the term safe spaces in college was really when I was introduced to it because I was a part of so many of them. A safe space to be myself, a safe space to dance as goofy as I wanted to, a safe space to explore my curiosities out loud, to speak Spanglish, porque me trabo, and I often can't remember certain words in English and vice versa. Spaces away from the main campus activities, to be honest. I joined spaces like Hermanas Unidas in college, which helped me get through my college experience. I needed to feel safe with my people to then go out there and form part of the larger unknown thing that was college. And so I understand safe spaces. I can feel it. I have felt what a safe space is. But when did we really start defining what a safe space is in the way that it exists today? So, according to Merriam-Webster, the first known use of safe spaces in print was in 1970. And a fun fact, other words like microaggression, identity politics, cognitive therapy were also first used in print during the same time. Now, it doesn't mean that they didn't exist before. It's just like they made it on print in the 70s, which, it makes sense. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the history of safe spaces. Because, when I think of a safe space, I understand it and I know it, again, because in college I experienced it. But simply put, I just thought a safe space was just somewhere where I feel comfortable. So let's explore what that actually has meant throughout history for some people. The term and physical, safe spaces were said to be created in the 1960s during the feminist and gay liberation movements. And that makes hella sense to me. Think about it, right? At the time, our communities are struggling to be themselves, to get the basic ability to simply live on their own terms, to get freedom, equitable opportunities. Now, we could go into each one of these movements into depth, and there have, of course, been changes to the way we approach the movements, and we've even learned and evolved to notice where they may have been excluding certain communities, right? So the women's movement, for example, not highlighting or really point blank just excluding Black women, Indigenous women, Latinx women, Asian Pacific Islander women, basically anyone that wasn't white. And so I do want us to keep this in mind as we continue our exploration, though. It's an important lens. A safe space for who? And I have to talk about my alma mater. I literally never know how to say that word. Anyways, the University of California, Berkeley. Q. Go Bears. I literally have to say that out loud every single time that my school is brought up. That's one of my toxic traits. Anyways, our campus is known for its rich history of activism. The Bay, in general, also has this history. A couple of organizations were created in the 60s that served as a safe space on campus for students, including Students for Gay Power, later changed to Gay Student Union in the 70s, and the Gay Liberation Front. These were spaces for community members to be themselves. It was like, okay, everywhere else I can get judged. I can get judged, I can't fully show up, but here I can be me. I'm surrounded by people that have similar experiences to my own, and we don't have to be scared of judgment. Now, I did some more digging, and it turns out that even before this, there was a psychologist, Kurt Lewin, who in the 40s was asked to give a group session to bosses in some corporate office in America, where he conducted the sensitivity training where people could give you honest feedback to help you improve as a leader. And so it was important that in these groups, people felt psychologically safe. It's the only way that honest change could happen. The article reads, "A safe space is created confidential and free of judgment, but precisely to allow people to mention concerns without fear of being condemned for them, on the understanding that they're hoping to change." Like, damn, safe spaces are so needed, and yet why does it feel like sometimes they're so hard to create? So I think this is a really good example of what the essence of a safe space is. It's being able to come together in a space where you feel truly comfortable, almost for this personal development, personal growth, right? And so while on one end, it's just a space for you to be yourself and be really comfortable, on the other side of things, it is, there can be a little bit of some discomfort because, let's be real, like you don't grow without a little bit of discomfort, right? And so I'm thinking, damn, safe spaces are just so needed. But throughout history, why have they been so hard to create? I, for one, remember feeling safe in my elementary school teacher's classroom, Miss Obregon. When I think of Miss Obregon, I think about the very first times the things I thought I knew were challenged. I remember she'd always refer to us as her kids. She didn't have kids of her own, and that was foreign to me in and of itself. This was the first time I had even thought I could entertain the idea of not having kids myself. It was empowering to know that there were options, and I know I was in elementary thinking this, but it's sort of what happens when you have a childhood that felt a little more like an adulthood. My ass didn't want any kids. She was strong, she was bold, she always wore red lipstick that faded as the day went by, had gorgeous curly hair, was short, but damn could no one mess with her. Not even us. Like, she loved us, but we probably gave her gray hairs way before her time. And she once said to me that people would judge us first by how we looked. She actually said this to us all the time. She made sure we understood that in her classroom we were respected, capable, and that we should always, always remember and be proud of our roots. She introduced me to reading in Spanish. She cultivated my love for my cultura and the power in showcasing it for the world to see, in a world that probably wasn't even good enough to enjoy the beauty of it, to be honest. So here's what I remember Miss Obregon clearly doing. She set expectations for her classroom. She demanded respect, but also gave respect. She was funny, strict as hell, but funny. She gave everyone the same amount of love. Some of us needed it more than others on any given day, and she knew exactly how to meet us where we were. That's what a safe space feels like. You're setting boundaries, expectations. You respect others and they respect you. You can be funny, you can be goofy, you can have moments of serious conversation, and they're always meeting you where you are, or you meeting someone where they are. And so my first experiences with public speaking, though I didn't know what them at the time, were through MCs of our talent shows or giving our graduation speeches, and Miss Obregon gave me those opportunities. I remember always being really nervous and kind of being the shy person in classrooms, but because she empowered us so much through just being, I felt empowered to go up on stage and do these things. And then that is actually how I realized that I really liked this space, that I loved being on stage, and that even though I was considered the shy person, I lit up when I was on stage. Like, I just became a different person. It was like you got the nerves of going up on stage, and then when you come back down, you're like, wow, can I do that again? It's kind of like a roller coaster. If you're into roller coasters, if you're not, you probably won't feel this, but you're at a roller coaster and it's super scary, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Why did I decide to do this? And you're doing it, and then finally it just happens, the big drop, and out of nowhere it's over, and you're like, wait, can we go back and do that again? That's what public speaking sort of felt like to me. And I will always be thankful for that initial opportunity, because I just felt safe. I felt like I was celebrated in the space that I was in. I felt that I could be myself. I felt that even if I was shy, it was cool. Like, people weren't tripping, you know? And so all of this brings me to where we are today with safe spaces. I think we all have a version of our safe space, a place where we go to feel free of judgment, like we can be the best or worst version of ourselves with no repercussions. So for this segment, I asked some of my friends and family members what safety meant to them. And here's what they said. A place where I can relax and feel okay. A space where I can feel comfortable and myself. Someone that makes me feel comfortable. Where I can feel at peace, relaxed, not judged, and be myself. So we see a common thread there, right? It's feeling comfortable, feeling okay, feeling like we can be ourselves, and just being relaxed, right? Like being at peace with, yep, this is who I am in this very moment. This is how I am showing up. And I'm comfortable. I'm not thinking about being judged. I'm not thinking about perceptions of others. I am just being. I am just existing. Do you have that space? I have that space. And I have that space both physically, and I also have that space in somebody else. And it's the most beautiful thing ever. With all of that being said, can you believe that spaces that make people feel these things, that make people feel comfortable, that make people feel at peace, relaxed, not judged, like they can be themselves, Isn't it crazy that these spaces have been mocked in history, actually recently, and oftentimes still are being mocked? So now we're going into the safe space and public speaking territory. I promise we'll be doing that very, very soon. But before we do that, I want to share one more thing. In fall of 2016, the University of Chicago sent a communication to its incoming freshman class, and it read, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own." Like, imagine being on the receiving end of that. Like, damn, if I got that as a freshman, I'd be like, wait, what? You don't condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces? Like, what? And the thing is, safe spaces can sometimes be uncomfortable because they're meant to create space for uncomfortable conversations. I mean, I guess I can see where some folks may feel like they're excluding, but then I'm like, no. We need to get over ourselves. These spaces are created and cultivated by the people in our societies that need them most. And so while the University of Chicago's communication may have outright just said, nope, you can't create these, we don't support trigger warnings, like, think about that. To me is so controversial. And at the time, there were some people that really supported that statement, because the idea behind this statement and why someone may support it was that they felt that these safe spaces could oftentimes limit free speech, or that it could create an environment where people didn't feel like they could say anything that was against what was considered the norm in that safe space. And really, if safe spaces are done correctly, you should feel like you can talk about things openly, right? Because it's one of love, it's one of non-judgment, right? And by the way, I didn't preface this in the beginning, but I am 100% aware of my privilege as a white passing Latina. I understand and have understood that. I navigate the world differently. So even in safe spaces meant for our Latinx community, I center that as a way that I approach how I even show up in these spaces. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, even for yourselves, it can be really difficult to do that, right? Because we are so closely identified to our cultures, and we often think, well, I didn't have it easy. Yeah, I mean, no one's saying anything of that sort, right? Like, we all have had struggles, but we navigate the world a little bit differently and with a little bit more, if not a lot more privilege, right? And so I think that when you are thinking about safe spaces, it's also important to think about how we show up in those spaces and why they make us feel safe, and making sure that we are creating the space for other people to also feel safe in those spaces. So it's safe for me as a white passing Latina, but is it safe for a Latina that has darker skin, right? These are literally the thoughts that we should be having, and answering these questions really honestly with ourselves to make sure that we actually are creating safe spaces. So I want to ask you right now, let's pause. Have you thought about how you felt the very first time you had to do a public speaking engagement? Did that thought come up? Now that we've sort of covered the basics of what a safe space is and how to think about them, let's dive into public speaking. So to me, there's a direct connection with safe spaces and public speaking. So what are those? Well, I used to start a lot of my workshops by asking people in the audience to quickly Google powerful public speakers. You could do that too right now if you'd like. Grab your phone, go on Google, powerful public speakers. This was because I remember getting into the industry of public speaking with both speaking to and being on stage with people that looked nothing like me, dressed nothing like me, though at the time I tried to fit in and dress to, how I thought I should be. And that's a whole other segment. But I want you to take a look at what comes up when you Google that. It was a list of men, lots of white men, and you had to scroll quite a bit to see one powerful woman. And I think that was like Oprah or something, and Michelle Obama makes the list too. but I couldn't see anybody that I resonated with. I never heard anyone that maybe had had the same experiences as I did. And we know that those are super important as first generation students, and then really when we're on campuses and stuff like that. The reason I'm focusing on campuses right now is because when we talk about safe spaces, they were essentially created and given space on college campuses for people, right? And so it's important to think about those, and how the lack of representation can oftentimes, that in and of itself, keep you from truly pursuing what you see as public speaking, right? Because again, I've said this time and time again, but public speaking isn't always being up on stage, though I would love everybody to take the stage because I think it's one of the most magical experiences ever. So anyways, I was in high school trying to fit in and get my foot in the doors at the time. These were spaces that I could only dream of being a part of, you know? When I first got asked to do my public speaking engagement, I quickly, obviously, I said yes because I was like, oh my gosh, this is me, like little old me. You want me to be a part of this? And then I quickly realized, like, I was talking to a room full of people that maybe had similar experiences to me, but the majority of them didn't, right? Here's the thing, though. Here's why I feel like I have always had such a healthy relationship with the art of public speaking, and it's that my teachers have been hella amazing. I have always felt supported by them. And it's wild to think about how much our teachers played a role in how we show up, right, in the world. Like, think about your teachers, right, throughout your years. I'm sure you can all think about that one teacher, those couple of teachers that really just inspired you, that really just cultivated confidence in you. Like, damn, we have so much to thank our teachers for. And I probably will chat Miss Obregon really quickly and just let her know, like, hey, I mentioned you in the podcast, and I think, like, you've really been a huge impact, right? But in high school in particular, too, like, this was still the case for me. I felt, that I had a safe space to openly practice my public speaking. Abby is one of my mentors, my English teacher, pretty much my friend, everything, right? All in one. And she was one of and has been, continues to be, just one of my biggest supporters, and I thank her for it. So in high school, our curriculum was pretty much set up in a way that forced us to understand the power of public speaking. We were speaking about what we were learning and making connections with the world. So our curriculum was project-based learning. So we didn't just take a test, that we did because the state obviously requires that. Every single class that we had a project, and at the end of the semester, we would have an exhibition where we presented our work to our families, our peers, all of everybody that came through, our communities. And sophomore and senior year, we had what was called a benchmark portfolio defense, and this was essentially you taking all of the work, when you were a sophomore, taking all of the work that you had done your freshman and sophomore year and saying, look, I'm ready to go into my junior year, and these are the reasons why, and you had to actually present it and talk about it. Now, at the time, we were all like, come on, why are we doing this? No one else is doing it. And it was scary. It was hella scary, right? Because we weren't used to it. And me, it's funny, I would consider myself a, quote, good student. It's like I did the work, I did the assignments, I completed everything I needed to do, and that was that. But this challenged me in such a different way. But what I want to say is that, it was scary, but all of my classmates and I were on the same page. We were literally in it together. When I presented for the first time at my school, I had my teacher's support, I had my peers' support. We were all just in community. And that was a safe space for me to practice public speaking. We were all in this situation where we hadn't done it before, and even if we had done it before, we hadn't done it in this way. We were so used to just taking a test and either like failing it or doing really well at it, or just getting, enough to graduate and just walking the stage. And almost, I would call it the bare minimum, though I don't even want to say that because the bare minimum is not minimum and it's not bare at all. It's a lot of work, right? But what I'm saying is this space that our teachers had cultivated, where we were all experiencing this for the first time together, and we almost had this sense of, I'm going to help you get through it, and I want to help you, and let's just do this together. Let's figure it out together. And so by the time that we were on stage and talking about our work and presenting, it was just so cool. Like, I wish I could show you all videos of us doing our presentations freshman year, where we just were so over it. We couldn't understand why we were doing it. To then our senior year, where we were so polished. We understood what we were talking about. We made crazy connections. We had to have an entire metaphor for our presentation, and it was just awesome. And I think that I am very privileged to have had and been exposed to public speaking first in that way, right? Where I'm in a community of, we're all on the same page, we're all doing this together at the same time, we're all confused as hell at the same time, we're all irritated at the same time. But hey, we have our teachers and we have each other to lean on and to just continue going. And I don't think, even at the time, I don't think we realized, yeah, we have each other. This is awesome. I think we're just trying to get through it. But looking back, I have talked to some of my high school peers, and we all talk about the impacts that had on us. We're much better communicators because of it. We're confident. We speak our minds. We all went into fields where we're advocating for either ourselves or our communities, and like the entertainment business. It's amazing to see. And this is what I mean when I say that public speaking has a power to completely transform you as an individual. So again, we need these safe spaces. And I almost equate them, to put it really simply, to how it feels like when you're the new kid in school. You make a friend, and then all of a sudden you're more confident. You're more you. And so I think that had I been put into the situation of, okay, go up on stage and speak, and I didn't have my community there, I didn't have a friend, right, as I'm calling it now, it would have been so much more difficult, because I wouldn't have had that support of somebody coming to me and saying, hey, let's talk about it. Let's just engage in this conversation, practice with me, do this with me, So what I ask, and what I think is so important about the relationship that we have with public speaking, is to start off and say, hey, be a friend to somebody. Pretend we're in kindergarten again, trying to make friends who, we don't care about anything else but having friends to play with, to laugh with, and to occasionally be too loud in class with. Think about your public speaking journey in that way. Who are your friends? Who can you go to that is your safe space, where you can cultivate this space of, hey, let's practice together, let's learn together, let's do this together. Because what I don't want to happen is for us to approach public speaking from a place of fear and being like, I need to perfect my skills because I'm scared of making a fool out of myself on stage. Though those things kind of never really go away. I want us to approach it from a place of, gosh, I feel so empowered by my community, by the people in my life, that I am more confident to be myself up on stage, whether that is up on stage or in a conference room or, wherever it is. And so I want to move into the last segment of this, or, sort of the last portion of this segment, and talk about how to create spaces when practicing our public speaking, both for ourselves and for others. So if you are the person that maybe sees somebody, gets really nervous, or you're in a position to help somebody, especially during things like interviews, and, let's say you're hiring for a position, you have the ability to kind of help somebody out, or, someone's really nervous about their public speaking, be that person that they can come to, especially reach out to them and ask if they'd like to practice. I have always been terrible at asking for help, so having someone ask me, hey, do you want to practice? Or hey, feel free to ask me if you ever have any questions about this. It kind of just opens that door initially, and they can say no, but at least you offered, and they know that you'll be there. They know that at least you're there. Now, when you're actually practicing with them, right, how do we create a safe space in the actual environment of, okay, I came to you, I asked for your help, I want to practice with you. So this is what we can do as people on the receiving end of that, right? The first thing, and this is super important, is to just remain an active listener so that you can give them praise, because that's really important, and feedback that makes them feel like you were truly listening. How lame is it when someone's like, yeah, that was super great, I loved it, right? But doesn't give you actual feedback. Like, talk about certain things that they do really well. Talk about the places where maybe they could grow. And of course, this comes after you create relationships. And that's the second thing, right? Creating relationships is super important. You can't just expect someone to be comfortable practicing their public speaking with you. It takes some time, right? I think I had a conversation with Dr. Lisette a couple of weeks back on the Ponte Perra chats over on Instagram, and we talked about how do you make people feel safe. And one of the things she said is, well, first you just have to offer it, right? And the other part is we're creating and cultivating relationships, and those take time. Someone may not feel comfortable, or you creating that safe space will take some time, but it's possible. And the other one is asking genuine questions. So to me, in a safe space, I don't ask a question, or I don't come at you from a place of I'm trying to prove you wrong, or I'm trying to just make sure you know that I think what I'm saying is right? Like, that's not how we want to approach it. Instead, ask genuine questions about what they're talking about, right? Whatever the subject is of the presentation, ask them an interesting question. I think that when you ask genuine questions, it can sometimes throw people off guard a little bit. It can even be genuine questions like, hey, how are you doing? Or like, truly, how are you doing? Or things about something that has maybe completely, is the opposite of what you're talking about or what their public speaking topic actually is. Because asking a question can sort of interrupt those nerves. Asking just a genuine, hey, what's going on with you kind of thing can interrupt the nerves for people and create more of that, again, personal connection with people. And I also think that part of creating a safe space for public speaking is sharing your own personal journey with the art. So many times people see me and maybe think I don't get nervous, or they think that I just came out the womb speaking, which would not surprise me, but they often think, oh, people don't see the nerves, people don't see the doubt, people don't see the initial interactions with public speaking that I had, the stuttering, the talking way too fast, the losing my train of thought. People don't see those parts, right? And so it's important to humanize our public speaking experience and just say, hey, here's how my personal journey went, and being really frank and really open about it. I think that creates such a safe space for somebody to truly just let their guard down and not feel like they have to be perfect in that moment, and just practice. Now, for ourselves, and I think this is super important, set your boundaries. And I know that's a hard one. I still can't even do that sometimes. So, like, what do I mean, right? Be clear on the kinds of spaces you will be a part of and the ones where you'll stay away from. The point is for you to feel comfortable. So, what I'm saying here essentially is setting boundaries as far as the spaces that we'll be a part of or will take space maybe more often than not is really important, right? And so you want to be part of a space that cultivates you and your personal development. Now, we're all parts of spaces that may not necessarily do that for us, yet we have to be there. Like sometimes jobs, right? They ain't safe spaces, but we got to be there because they pay the bills, right? So where else can you find that safe space for you? Second is asking for help. This one is hard. I know it because I feel it all of the time. Like, girl, I don't want to ask for help. But it's so much easier when you just ask for help. Like, just do it. Do it once, and then you'll be a lot better at doing it the second, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time, and forever, okay? Now, also, third is creating a regular practice for yourself. And, have you heard about, creating a habit and how long it takes to create a habit, right? It's the same with public speaking. We have to create a regular practice for ourselves of saying, okay, even if you're looking to hone in on your public speaking skills from the perspective of, I just want to be a better advocate for me and use my voice. I don't necessarily want to go up on stage, right? Create a regular practice of doing that. And the way that you can do that is sometimes you're in a meeting and you have a thought, and in that moment your heart starts beating, your hands start to sweat, this has happened to me. I write things down and I try to interrupt that behavior and interrupt that thought so that I don't stay quiet and I actually say something. Porque how many times has it happened to me where I get super red, my ears get red, my heart starts like going at 100 miles per hour, and then I don't say anything. And then afterwards, I'm like, I should have said something. And it kills me every single time. So I've made it a practice to interrupt that behavior and create a regular practice of using my voice in whatever situation that is. Even if it's just something minor, even if all I contribute is I actually think the same, right? Even if I have the same thought as someone that said something, obviously you don't want to take space where it's not needed, but think about how you can contribute and how you can build yourself up in the process. And then the last one is hang around those people that help you feel elevated, that make you feel genuinely comfortable, right? Like, we are in way too many spaces where we feel uncomfortable. Way too many spaces where we feel like we gotta be something different than who we are already, which is beautiful creatures, right? Deserving of everything that we want. And we need we don't need to deal with that, right? Sometimes, yes, like I said, we're in college campuses and we gotta deal with feeling like we're in the middle of just everybody that looks nothing like us, that just looks different, that maybe does, that maybe we feel like we don't have anything in common with, right? But let's find those spaces for ourselves, right? Find again that safe spaces. I mentioned I have a safe, and my safe space really is my home. So I don't know how good that is sometimes, because it's like no one else is here. But I have conversations with people where I feel like I can just be truly myself with them, and so they have become my safe space, right? Think about those conversations that you have with folks. How are you creating a safe space among your own communities too? So, again, I want to just kind of talk about, lastly, to end our segment, is to really think about, what are those safe spaces for you? What does that look like? And they don't have to be politically associated. They don't have to be for a cause. None of that, right? Like, where do you feel safe? And I know we talked a lot about the history of safe spaces today, and they usually have been attached to this larger goal. And in this case, I want you to almost simplify it a bit more. Start off by simplifying what that safe space is for you, with the end goal of it leading to your personal development and for you to be a great public speaker, right? Where do you feel safe? What things about a person or space make you feel safe? Take inventory of that, because then every time you encounter that, you can say, this is my safe space, right? Practice your public speaking there, because it can be a vulnerable experience to do it in your comfort, And believe me, there will be situations where you have to do it in not so comfortable space, right? So find your safe spaces, practice your public speaking there, because public speaking is a very vulnerable experience and you want to be able to feel comfortable doing it. And so I guess what I'm saying is that the practice of public speaking can and should be done where you feel comfortable, because I believe that breeds confidence to be yourself, to show up authentically. And I'm definitely not blind to the fact that sometimes you simply have to do something uncomfortable to grow. But as we've heard today, safe spaces don't mean you'll be babied. In fact, often it can mean that you will be challenged in a way that leads to your personal growth. So what I'm saying is that while many of us may have experienced public speaking in not so safe spaces, and we may have negative associations with the art of public speaking, a way to combat that is to go to our safe spaces, practice public speaking there, so that then we can go out into the world and practice being authentic and be our most authentic self, right? So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're always going to be comfortable. In fact, public speaking brings out that vulnerability, brings out the uncomfort, and that's exactly what makes it such a rewarding experience. But at the same time, I don't want us to connect public speaking with fear. I want us to approach public speaking from a place of, I am confident in myself. I love the art of public speaking. I really want you all to love public speaking so much. And I want you all to feel confident in it because you love it, not feel confident in it because you approached it from a place of fear. So, unlearning the idea that you have to be terrified of something or that you have to be super uncomfortable all the time to do it well, right? And the reason I'm saying a safe space is essential for public speaking too is because as a Latina, as a woman, oftentimes there just aren't spaces where you can be your most authentic self. And a safe space, again, I'm going to bring it back to that example that I always bring, which is when you are the new kid on the block or the new kid or you're just different, right? You don't feel that great. And when you make one friend at school, it's like this newfound confidence awakens in yourself. That is exactly what it's like to find your safe space within public speaking, your safe people, your safe community. When you're able to practice authentically and be yourself and not be afraid of messing up or whatever it is, and you trust the other people to give you feedback that works for you, like feedback that is actually good, that will make you a better person, that makes you stronger to show up in those spaces where sometimes we're not represented. So with that being said, thank you so much for sticking around. The sources to all of what we talked about will be included in the description of this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. I hope that you learned a little bit more about safe spaces, that if anything, you're thinking about it a little bit more. Whatever you were doing during this podcast, whether you were just hanging out, multitasking, whatever it was, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your public speaking journey. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you during the next segment of the Chats with Yvonne podcast.